Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amherst Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of History Organizations. I want to welcome you all to this afternoon's webinar on the Good to Great 2.0 grants. I'm really excited to have representatives here today, both from Connecticut Humanities and the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office within DECD. I'll let folks introduce themselves, and I think pretty much all of these folks are known to you. If not, you will know them very soon. I just want to thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to learn with you all about this grant today. I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Emily, for just a moment to go over a few logistics for the program, and then we'll get started. Emily? Unmute, please.
Thank you. I'm usually the one who ends up muting people, not the one who's muted. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emily Garfinkel. I am the Membership and Programs Manager at the Connecticut League of History Organizations. So our organization, the Connecticut League of History Organizations, for over 50 years, we have strengthened and sustained our members by sharing knowledge and experience in promoting best practices among museums, historical societies, and all of those who steward Connecticut's heritage collections. We are very pleased to offer this program to you in partnership with Connecticut Humanities and DECD and SHPO. So I want to thank everybody for being here today to offer this information. Just some really quick housekeeping before I pass it over to our speakers. This program will be recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards. So just in case you're off mute, if that's something that you want to change, you are welcome to do so. So this will be open and accessible to everyone afterwards. So feel free to share with your colleagues as needed. As well, this program will be sent out by a follow-up email if you are registered for this event. Obviously you are, since you are here. Be on a lookout for a follow-up email from me, which will provide any of the resources that our speakers have for you, as well as a recording. And if you like programs like this, I encourage you to check out some of our exciting events that we plan to have in the future for 2023. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Liz Shapiro at DECD. So thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Shapiro. I know a lot of people on this call. I'm the Director of Arts Preservation and Museums for the state of Connecticut. And I just wanted to welcome everybody here. I'm going to sort of set the stage for the Good to Great 2.0. Many of you have been around the umpteen years, 2015, I think, 2014, 2015, since the original Good to Great grant started. Good to Great was designed to be a program that's funded by funding from the bond commissions, so this is bond funded money that is designed to give small and mid-sized, particularly organizations, a bit of a leg up that they don't usually have, and to offer capital expenditures, money for capital expenditures to organizations to take the needle. Like if you're already doing good things and you're pretty happy about how things are looking, but you've done a strategic plan or you've had some consulting done, and all of a sudden you know that if you only did X, your organization could be great. You could have more visitors. You could advertise better. You could serve those visitors better. You could create any kind of a better, improved visitor experience. And when I say visitors, I mean visitors from your town, your constituency, your regular audience, and also visitors from outside, so tourists. You could make that experience into something that's really amazing. And that's what these grants are designed to do. These grants are really hard for the State Office of Historic Preservation, Office of the Arts, and Office of Tourism to administer because they are bond funds and they require a little bit of a different way of stewardship and on our part than a regular typical grant from, let's say, the Office of the Arts or Connecticut Humanities might look. For those of you who've been paying attention, right, for the last 2 or 3 years, we look a little bit different now than we looked 2 or 3 years ago. One of the great things is that the Office of the Arts and SHPO have been working really, really closely with Connecticut Humanities and, of course, with the CLHO to essentially provide assistance for our ecosystem, those arts and cultural and humanities organizations that we serve in a way that makes more sense and is better designed to meet your needs. to ensure that we continued to offer the Good to Great grants, we started talking to Connecticut Humanities, and Connecticut Humanities, who's our valued partner, said, you know what, we can help you with this. What we can do is we can kind of provide the overarching background administrative support for this program, which means create the website, manage the letters of intent that you guys have been filling out, help with the grant review, just help make the process streamlined until we get to contracting. Once we get to contracting, the ball is back a little bit in our court from the state's perspective, because again, grant bond funds can't be transferred out of a state agency. So I'm watching Scott. You guys got to watch Scott's face as I'm talking, because it's hilarious, because he's smiling yes, and then he's shaking his head no. It's very, I feel good about it. So at any rate, that is where this partnership came from. It is an evolving partnership, but the partnership is designed to make these funds accessible, to make the interface of support for you all seem to be really smooth, and to just be more effective and more responsive as a whole. So that's all I'm going to say about the program. And I'm going to thank Amaris and Emily for hosting us from CLHO today. And I'm going to publicly thank my colleagues from SHPO for being here, Todd Levine and Jonathan Kinney, and Scott and Leanne from Connecticut Humanities, who have been working with us really hard to make sure that this program is accessible, as easy to understand as possible, and will make sense and get the money out the door so we can actually begin to fund some of these great projects that you have. So Scott, I think I did. Scott tells me what to say. I think I covered it all, and I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you to Amaris and to Emily and CLHO for hosting us again. Those of you that have been on some of the info sessions with us for operating support or some of the other programs that have rolled out in partnership and collaboration with Liz and her teams at SHPO and Office of the Arts, it's going to be pretty familiar. We'll do a run through of the program, our website, the application, in this case, the letter of intent. We want to make sure that you all are asking your questions. So please do put them in the chat as we go along. You will have Leanne answering them in real time faster than I ever could. I also want to make sure that I not only thank CLHO and Liz and Todd and Jonathan from SHPO for being here, Leanne for running the chat, but our newest colleague, Becky Dacoscus, who many of you might have been emailing with about some of your final reports, is here as well. I want to thank her for all the great work she's been doing here. We threw her in at the hardest part. She came in October when we were in our biggest part. So she's learned about everything in real time with you guys. But without further ado, I want to talk for about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes about the infrastructure, the application, the LOI, the guidelines and stuff with you all. And then I want to leave ample time at the end for your questions. So please do put them in the chat as you have them. But then there will be ample time for on-air questions, and we'll get you between all of us here the answers to your questions. So you can go back and put in an LOI by the deadline, which is coming up on February 3rd, and an application, which is due a month later on March 3rd. So let me share the screen. All right. As Liz said, with this partnership, materials, website, grant submission system, those are all the things that we're offering at Connecticut Humanities. So you can go to our website, cthumanities.org. If you hover over grants, the information about our grant lines writ large is always on the left, and then our individual grant lines are on the right. So this one, you're looking for Good to Great 2.0 grants, which is about halfway down the list. And if you click on that, you will find our web page. And again, all of our pages have the same kind of familiarity with jump information. If you want to go great to about it and an overview, or apply or frequently asked questions, you can jump just to the part you want to have. You'll see right now we got a banner about today's info session. After today, we will put the link to the YouTube there. So it'll be available on CLHO's YouTube channel, and they will send it out, but we will have it right here for you front and center as well. And then we've got information by tab. So what is this program? What are the goals of the program? How can I apply? We'll hit each of these tabs just a little bit here. So again, this is public funding. It is bond funding, as Liz said. It is to help organizations transform themselves. If with a little bit of public infusion, they can take their operations, the way that they serve the public with their building and their facilities, from a good level to an even better level, a great level, That's the intent here. And it doesn't matter whether you are a museum, a historic house, a historical society, an arts organization, a cultural organization, but you need to be a 501c3 organization. So this is not for all of the different types of organizations that can come to us for some of the other grants. If you are a municipality, you cannot come to us directly. However, if you're a municipality that has a building that you have leased out and have a 10-year plus lease agreement with a 501c3, that would qualify. So we'll get into some of those nitty gritty of stuff here, but by and large, you need to be a 501c3 that's applying directly. We especially encourage the small to middle-sized organizations, like Liz said, that have budgets of under $500,000. That does not mean if you are a large organization that you cannot apply. Organizations of all sizes are eligible, but know that we are going to be, the state will be taking a portion of the allocated funds and making sure that it goes to those smaller places with $500,000 a year or less budgets. So that's all I want to say about this tab, but let's go to the goals tab of things here. So you need to have a capital project, and we have had some requests from places wanting to do more programmatic work, creating a documentary, running a program series. And by and large, if they do not have a capital component to them, that capital component could involve your building and structural changes that you need to your building. It could involve capital work that needs to happen on your grounds, like a parking lot expansion process or ADA compliance walkways and grading on your site, or purchase of capital equipment. You need an HVAC system. You need some other equipment that will have a lasting value of more than just the moment that you're using it. It is not going to be a fit here. You have to have some capital component here. And that capital component should help you enhance and transform the visitor experience. I think that's an important thing here. If you get this funding and you do this project, how is the public, how are your visitors, how is your community going to better have an experience, learn about the work that you do, the mission-related work that you do, bring more visitors to your community, which are going to do that tourism aspect of things and bring more tax dollars into your community that the state wants to see happen through these grants. And you can see more about what a capital project is at the bottom here, and I mentioned a bunch of those things. One note at the bottom here, because these funds can be used for capital work on structures, if your structure is in a historic district, if your structure is on the historic register, whether it be national or state, or if your building that you're wanting to do work on is 50 years old or older, you will need to be following the Secretary of the Interior standards. So we can talk more about that, but just know, if you want to start taking walls down of places and you have an older structure, there's going to be certain guidelines that you need to be aware of so that we're doing good stewardship as a state with the use of these funds. Guidelines and application tab, and we'll talk more about each of these in a second here, but just know we do have a letter of interest that is required to get to the application stage, but you can click here and preview it, and we'll talk more about it. But even before you're able to get to the application, you can click over here and you can see the application. So just because you're only at the LOI stage does not mean you can't see what questions will be coming should your LOI be advanced to the next stage. But let's look at the grant guidelines here first. If you click on that, again, it's going to be familiar. We took the information from our partners at the state and kind of transformed it to our template here. And I won't go over the stuff that we've already talked about. But I think, a couple key things here. We didn't talk about, these grants should look beyond basic facilities repair or expansion to consider how it's helping you meaningfully transform the way you can serve the state. So by that, I mean, this project can help you fund a roof if you need a new roof. But you should be talking about how that roof is not just a project that's deferred maintenance that's needed, but how the doing of that is going to really help you in the way that you serve the public and releasing funds, which will allow you to be doing programs and activities versus having to put it all into facilities repair, which would hinder your ability to serve the state in other ways. So there's got to be some connection made. We talked about who's eligible to apply. And again, for-profit municipalities, organizations that currently have an open good to grant. I think there was one that was coming in here. So you either need to close your grant before you apply, or if there's going to be a project that's closing out by the end of March, let us know. I think we'll be able to let you apply, but you're not going to be able to access any funds for a second until the first is closed, and it might hinder your ability to be successful for a second if a first one is still open and not really close to being closed. Your project requests can go from 25,000 up to 500,000. We'll talk more about that because there are different match requirements based on how much funding you will be requesting. It's a reimbursement program, which means that you are going to have to be spending money, and as you spend money, you will be reimbursed from the state for use of those funds. This does then have something we've been getting a number of questions on in the last couple of days. For any projects that get funded, there will be a lien, a temporary 10-year lien placed on the property to make sure that the purpose and use of the building that the state is investing in does not go out of public use for the same kind of purposes that they were investing in. And if you immediately transform, you'd have to give basically all the money back, and every year another 10% comes off until after 10 years, the lien is completely removed. Projects have a 2-year window from contract date to complete the project. So you need to be thinking of things, and some of you have really large projects that will take many years. So we need to start thinking in phases. What parts of this are you going to be able to complete that you want to ask for funding that can be done in 2 years? And not just that can be done in 2 years, but can be done in 2 years for at the end of that to have some sort of a debut moment that something is coming online that can serve the public. Imagine a ribbon cutting where you want Liz to come out and you want the governor to come out and you want to have that moment of this room, if not the full building, this room, this space, this activity area is now online and usable, and the public's ability to access you and your mission have been transformed. For match, and this is unheard of, I've never seen a lot of programs like this. If you come in for under $50,000, you don't require a match. So you can ask for up to $50,000 and that could be your whole project, a $50,000 project that's fully funded from the state. That said, as we're reading through LOIs here, if you have a $1.5 million worth of work that needs to happen on your building to turn around to the public, and you ask for a $25,000 or $50,000 letter of interest, we're going to kick it back and say we're a little concerned here that we don't know exactly what work is going to happen when you've got umpteen times that needed, and will something be able to be debuted at the end of 2 years? So right size your award, explain what portions of it are going to be done with this granting program. Don't just try to get in under 50,000 so you don't have to meet the match requirement. If your request is beyond that, you can go up to 500,000, but you will need a 20% cash match at that point. You do not need to have the cash in hand at time of letter of interest or at time of application. But note, if you're awarded, you're going to have this cash in hand to be able to start work on your project and to gain access to the contract and the state funds. This can be cash you already have in hand. You don't need to do fundraising. If you've got money that's been put aside for this project and you've already got it, that's great. If you need to do fundraising for this, that's great. But again, you're going to need a minimum 20% cash match, and you're going to need to have it in hand within 2 weeks of notification to be able to start advancing with your contract. There's a whole list of eligible expenses. I won't go into them all, but no, again, you're going to have some capital project or capital costs. Excuse me. And if it's not on this list, just ask us. We're getting lots of questions about can this happen? And by and large, if it's needed for the project and there are capital parts to it, it's going to be most likely allowable as long as it's not excluded. And what's going to be excluded? Anything that you're going to do that's going to go against the Secretary of the Interior standards, so you're not using state bond money to adversely impact your historic site. You also are not allowed to use these funds for your general operating costs. Luckily, there's a lot of other programs right now, including our cultural fund, which have been awarding general operating costs. So you can't be using this to just normally pay your staff, their benefits, your rent. It's got to go towards the project costs that you are asking us to fund. This is a project-based, a capital project-based grant. No, because you are using funds that are state funds, there will be an open bidding process. So you're going to have to get bids for the different contractors that you we'll be using, and the state, and we can help you understand some of that as the program goes on. Already hit on this a little bit, but the deadline schedule, you've got an LOI deadline of February 3rd. We've been encouraging folks, once you have a LOI that you're ready to submit, don't hold out until the 3rd, because we are reviewing these on a rolling basis. Every Tuesday, there's a review, and we're clearing ones that have met all the requirements to go onto the application stage on a weekly basis. But the last time you can get in is February 3rd. And the sooner you get in, the sooner you're cleared, the sooner you'll have access to the application and start filling it out. But like I said, even before that, you can see that information on our website. Notification is anticipated early June. We put June 12th here. We want to get these awards made by the end of the fiscal year, and the state's fiscal year again runs July 1 to June 30. You will need some documents at the time of application, so just be aware of these. You'll need operating budgets for your organization for the last 2 years. If you've been doing cultural fund grants, you already have some of these things. In fact, we'll only require you to give us your most current one. If you do not own the property that you are wanting to do work on, you're going to need to show a copy of your lease, and your lease is going to need to be at least 10 years in length. It can be longer than that. It cannot be shorter than that. If you are altering buildings, photography is going to be needed, and you're going to need to be submitting some specific photographs of the building and the work that it's going to be doing. And you're going to need to submit a list of your board members. Switch quickly to the LOI. The LOI is pretty short. So again, this is not going to take you a lot of time. There are a number of questions at the beginning to make sure that your organization is eligible. And by that, I mean, if you're a 501c3, you're incorporated in Connecticut, you do your business in Connecticut, you're a majority organization of doing arts, cultural, historic work. This is not for social service organizations. We want to know the size of your organization. Again, it does not matter. Everyone can apply, but again, there's a priority of having some of the smaller. So we want to see the size of the organizations that are coming in. If you have an open good to great grant, we need to be aware of this, because again, you should be either closing out really fast or by the time you apply or shortly thereafter. How much money are you anticipating asking for? And then just 2 narrative blocks. 1, describe your project. And be specific. We're getting a number of them that are not specific enough, and we're going back to for more information, because our building needs all kinds of work from roof to basement. It needs almost a total restoration, and it's not more specific than that. So explain at this phase, we're really looking for help with stabilizing and making us moisture resistant, and we need a roof, and we need some other envelope repairs to make sure that moisture is not damaging our building. Whatever those things are, be specific. And then how does it help advance arts, culture, history, and or tourism? It could be one, it could be multiple of those. And how is it going to help you really do more work in that area to serve your public? That's it for the LOI. At that point, once you're cleared, you can go onto the application. And when we clear you to go onto the application, there'll be some information about other grants that you've gotten or your organization as a whole. There is some question branching here. So if you've got previous grants from us, some of the questions will come to you or not come to you based on your answers to questions. But there's basic information about your organizations and your social media and stuff. If we've got it, we're not going to ask for it again. There are questions about, have you received funding, whether it be from the legislature or from other bond funds? And if so, in the last 6 years. If you've ever received historic restoration funds from the State Historic Preservation Office for the property that you're asking for help from now, and when. Information about your budget and finances for the organization. And if we don't have you in our system from 2 years ago, if we have you, you don't have to ask it again. Then we want to get into what facilities do you maintain? How many buildings? Where are they? How big are they? When were they constructed? Do you own the property involved in this proposal? Again, if yes, and you're a 501c3, you're set. If no, you're going to have to start proving like you're under a long-term lease to make sure that the state is putting bond funds where it's allowed to put bond funds. Are you on the state or national register? And then some questions that relate to your historic structure if the answer was yes. What kind of reports do you have and plans do you have for the property? Again, this is where the photos are coming in of the project and the building that you'll be working on. Then we get into the narrative where you're going to give us much more detail about the project that you're specifically asking for. Not the least of which is your project going to be ready to go by July 1st? And the state is looking for stuff that's more shovel ready, able to jump into pretty quickly after award. If no, they're going to ask when your project will be ready. Summarize it in 2 to 3 sentences. And this is a key area. And I know I've talked about this for other grant lines that we operate. We want to know, not just so our reviewers know what's coming real quick, but we're going to use this in many different ways for public consumption on our website, in press releases. So make sure anything you do here, you can quickly get across what you're doing, but you want the rest of the world to be able to read it to understand as well. Then go into more length. Tell us about the project, why it's necessary, how it came to be, why it's the right step for you and your community at this time, detailed work that you are going to need to do. You've got 10,000 characters. That's not 10,000 words, 10,000 characters to tell your story. And then another 4,000 characters beyond that to say, so what? Why does it matter? Make your compelling case. Pitch the reason why this matters, why your project should get funded above another project, how it helps to promote the priorities of the program and will push the needle in your ability to serve the public and your community from good to great. Some other questions about you, do you have strategic plans? When were they adopted? Who your current audience is, how this is going to help you bring in different audiences or more numbers, how you're currently telling people and letting them know about the work that you do, if this project is going to help you do that differently at the end. Who is working with you on this, from the project manager, folks on your staff or your board, the contractors that you're envisioning working with. Let us know about the personnel here. Give us the project schedule. And this is important. We want to know about the stuff that's going to be happening in the project period. So July of 23 to June of 25. So if this is a multi-phase project, you can let us know in the application narrative what has already come or what would happen after this if there's still phases to come, but focus on a detailed schedule here of when stuff is going to happen, leading up to when that ribbon cutting moment would be taking place and the governor would be at your site. What are you spending the money on? So you've asked for $25,000 up to $500,000. Let us know by category how much funding will be going towards land costs or acquisition, research and development phase, creation of architectural or engineering plans and related expenses, construction, and we've separated, materials and labor, the capital equipment, whether you're renting it or purchasing it as a part of this, other administrative expenses and fees, any contingency, and there are allowable contingencies here. Of a percentage, and then other costs that are not mentioned here. And there's a little bit more detail about each section and what we'd be looking for and some examples of what lines might look like when you enter them. And when we get to the contingencies, just down here, most, you can go up to 15% with your total costs for contingency. So we know there might be cost overrides. We know the whole world has inflation going on right now and costs are rising. And if those continue, you can build in some 15% contingency if the cost of labor and materials continue to rise. Cash match. If you're asking for more than $50,000, the cash match question will pop up. If you're asking for less, it will not appear for you. So then it's simple questions. Do you have the cash match needed already? If yes, it's going to start to ask, what are those sources of funds? When did you get them? If it's not in hand, we're going to be asking, how do you plan on meeting it? And when do you anticipate finding out about that? So again, there's some questions here that'll branch you out in the right way based on your answers. There's questions asked about visitation. If you've gotten a CT Cultural Fund operating support grant, you will not have to answer these. These are only for places that have not gotten a grant from us recently. Again, part of the advantage is to us working in partnership with SHPO to offer this program. Same thing for staffing questions here. These are going to be things that you will not have to answer if you've recently answered them for us. Information about your board, your bylaws, how often they meet. Has your organization previously completed a capital project, and to tell us about what that project is if you select yes. And that is it. Then it's who's your executive director and your CEO. Who's going to be the lead person on this project between our organization, SHPO, and your organization. Do you have a profile on ctvisit.com? If not, it takes you through steps on how to create one. And then because this is an online application, we have a certification block here that you would check. Does not require a hard signature. And last but not least, you can opt into our e-newsletter so you find out about new opportunities like this as they come along. And that is it. You submit by March 3rd. You will know about your decision by middle of June. And as I said, in between our submission, things will kind of go between our department and the State Historic Preservation Office. We're going to help with the running of grant reviews, but funds will flow through the state. They will not come from Connecticut Humanities, and contracting will happen with the state. Contracting will not happen with Connecticut Humanities. Final reports and things we will still continue to have happen through our system, just like you've been doing for some of the other grant lines with us. That is a lot from me. I'm going to put it on pause. I'm going to get a drink of water here. Leanne, are there some questions here that we want to answer? And I'll kick it over for you for a minute while I get a drink of water.
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions that I think kind of fall into the same general, larger questions. So one of them would be, can we apply for the bidding of the work that we need to do, or for a planner, or for the kind of planning phase before the actual shovel-ready part of the project?
I'm sorry, Leanne, were you asking one of us? I wasn't sure what was, if you were going to go on to answer the question. What was Todd? Okay, Todd, John, we've been trying to answer questions in the chat, and so we've been discussing. So I was not paying attention to.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
And I'm back, and I was getting water. So
I was typing. So yeah.
One more time.
So if you can direct the question as you say it, Liz,
Please.
Todd, Jonathan, then we'll.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure who the best person is to answer this question, but it's essentially, can we apply for parts of the work before the shovel-ready part of the project? So the bidding, or for a planner or something, before we're actually ready to do the capital work.
Yeah, so essentially it's good to great, right? So at the end of the project, you've got to have something that you can celebrate publicly with the public. Somehow the visitor experience has got to be better. So just a plan for work would not qualify for good to great. It may qualify on if you have a historic property from some of the other funding sources that we have in SHPO's office, but you need to have, this is how I think about it. If you can have a party where you cut a ribbon, then your project is probably would qualify under good to great. And so use that. You probably wouldn't cut a ribbon for the celebration of a master plan, for example. So I hope that makes some sense. I don't know if my colleagues want to add to that.
Yeah, this is Todd. I'll just add that you also have to have something happening. So it can't be, you want to acquire an empty shell and do your thing. It has to be already good. So you're actually moving the needle from good to great. It can't be from nothing to good, because the program is designed just for that.
Another question was, what if someone else owns a building? So for example, what if we manage the building, but it's owned by a town? Or what if we have another group that owns, a municipality owns a building, but a 501c3 occupies it? What happens if someone else, not my organization, owns the building?
Or if I can add one more thing in there, Leanne, which I think hasn't been addressed, if we have I think it was one of the children's museums, a lease to own agreement that's on a 3-year contract.
Yep, so you need to have, so if it's municipal owned, the municipality themselves cannot apply, but a nonprofit with a long-term lease of 10 years or more can. And the reason for that is within the bond language, if it's not municipal or state agency owned, you have to put a 10-year lien on it. So that might be a question we can talk about a little bit more if anybody has questions about the lien. But a 3-year lease is not long enough. You'd have to go back to the municipality or the owner to renegotiate to be 10 to be able to apply.
Another question that's come up a couple of times and I know has been answered in the chat, so I just want to highlight it, is questions about what funds can be used to match this grant. You can't use state funds to match this grant, but other sources of funding are eligible for matching this grant. So I just wanted to highlight that since that came up a couple times.
And it can be cash that you already have of your own. It can be things that you fundraised for. It can be other grant funders, but again, that funder can't be the state of Connecticut, and you can't be matching like your CT Cultural Fund operating support grants with this here, because again, those are state funds that we're administering for the state largely. So the source of the funds is important, and if it's going back to the state, it's not going to be allowed to be used as a match.
There are a couple questions about timeline in general. So you know, if notification happens in June and we're expected to start in July, questions about when can we expect to be reimbursed, or how might the bidding process work? When should we secure people by? Those types of questions.
Todd, I think this one might be best for you here. I mean, historically, how does this work in terms of if a place is all lined up and they're ready to go, what's a likely scenario of when funds might get released, and talk about through the bidding process a little bit more for someone that's maybe doesn't have experience doing this as much.
Sure. So the state has an actual procurement and bidding package that you have to follow. Depending on how much money you're spending, we'll provide different guidelines. But generally, it's an RFP for each of the components broadly. Certain cases will require waivers. For instance, you know, one of our projects from, you know, a couple of years ago was Ledge Light, which is completely surrounded by water. So it's hard to get contractors out there easily, right? So that might require a waiver. But generally, you're going to follow these bidding and procurement guidelines. That said, this time around, it's a reimbursement 100%. So you will be either taking a line of credit to pay for the project or using your own funds, and then you get reimbursed in total at the end for the amount of the grant.
Another question that's come up a couple of times is about the SHPO review and just what that entails. So this one question said, can you describe what is entailed in a SHPO review for a building that is on the state list of historic places?
And I think this is environmental review, Todd, but talk about other types of review too that might come up if there are other types of review that could get flagged and why.
Sure. So any state funding triggers automatically what's called the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, which for all state agencies, they have to consider the impacts of a project. So if it's a building that's on the state or national register or eligible for listing on the state or national register, we would review the project to see if there are what's called an adverse impact. If there is an adverse impact, we would work with the applicant to find a way to avoid that adverse impact. And the same will go for wetlands, deep, and any other of the state agencies that has a potential to impact our environment.
Can you give a hypothetical example of an adverse impact that might have happened at one point in time and how that was resolved? I think people don't understand what some of these terms might mean and how it might hit them.
Sure. So let's say you wanted to use your state register building for a new museum and you want to knock down a wall to put a new addition in the front. That would be an adverse effect, and we would work with you to try to come up with a different solution that would be less detrimental to the historic resource. The solution might simply be a smaller addition off the rear. But that's kind of what we're looking to do, is preserve historic fabric. So when we do this process, that's always going to be the goal of the State Historic Preservation Office: preserve historic buildings and historic fabric that are character defining.
One other set of questions then would be, can Good to Great be used to move an organization into a new building or to purchase a new building, and so not necessarily for improving the building that you're already in.
So this would be an existing organization that is already doing nonprofit work, but moving into a different space is going to take their organization and their capacity from good to great. Todd, I think the answer is yes to that, but I don't want to just say no here and screw things up.
Yeah, I think it's you're going to have to demonstrate how you move the needle. So, I mean, you know, and I think this is for everybody, you know, you as you know, and you can see here, there's going to be a lot of competition. So your ability to articulate how you're moving that needle is going to be really important. So yes, theoretically, it's eligible, but if it doesn't demonstrate how you're really changing the experience, and then be able to grow from that too, it's going to be important for you to be able to say that well in your application.
Yeah, and
Can I ask a question?
sure, I'm trying to see who's
It's
speaking. But yes.
difficult to write this
Howard.
in the chat, but the 2-week timeline to be able to match for any significant project seems to be, you know, almost disqualifying, because the grant is a competitive grant. So I'm not sure I'm going to get it, but in the meantime, I need to fundraise for a project I may not be able to do unless I get both of them at the same time. So is that 2 weeks statutory, or is it something that you guys just came up with? You know, I mean,
I can address that question. So these funds were designed to be used for projects that places have been planning and to put into place using their strategic planning process for a long time. So because in theory, right, if you know that there's something that has been going on that could bring you from good to great, it's not something that you woke up yesterday thinking about. And I'm not suggesting, Howard, that you are not planning. I know you know that I'm not saying that. So it truly, bond funds are not designed that way. They're really designed for thoughtful projects that have been in the works for a little bit of a longer amount of time. Sometimes organizations have access because, you know, you have a donor in your pocket that's like, okay, you guys, if you get this $100,000 grant, I will pledge you, you will get the $50,000. And so all you would need is a letter from that donor saying, if this grant is awarded, then $50,000 donation will be made to that organization. So there's some skinny on that, but we do know that there's like bond funds, there's a lot of ways that they have to be used. And I know that there's some chat about the reimbursable expenses. Yep, we get it. It's not going to work for every organization. So apologies for that up front.
And I mean, part of the reasons these are here as well is the state is looking to find those projects that are closest to being ready with an infusion of money, whether it be a smaller or larger. And that's going to be taken into priority. If places are further away versus closer away with a competitive round, those that meet all of the boxes and are more ready to go today and have money in hand will be closer to the front of the line, I think is a fair assessment.
so if I can clarify what Liz said there, which seems to be in conflict with what was in the chat. If I have a commitment from a foundation to give me 100,000 contingent on getting this other thing, that's sufficient. I don't actually have to have the cash in the bank.
So yeah, sorry. So if all we need to know is that when you apply, you make a stronger case for yourself by saying that you have a pledge for that funds. And then what we're going to do is you're going to be using your cash match right away. So one of the things, and it's hard to get everything exactly right, but because there's a lot of different discussions going on and some of them are a little bit nuanced. So if you have a pledge for those funds, you can totally use that pledge as your cash match. Just know that we're going to be asking you to use those pledged funds first. So if you have a donor that's pledging over the course of 3 years, you know, $2,000, $5,000, $15,000, and you're going to need all of that money in year one, right, to match the grant, you're going to need to let that donor know that you're going to need all of that money in year one. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I see Leslie's hand up, so maybe we just go to Leslie and then we'll go back to Leanne in the chat.
Hi. Yeah, I had a question for Todd. And my question regards the bidding process. And I am not familiar with the bidding process. So I'm not sure if, like, for instance, the project I'm thinking of is a roof on our future archive facility. Now, do we choose the contractors we'd like to have bid, or do you have a list of certain ones we have to deal with, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's all in this package that you guys are going to be looking at, and it'll give you guidance on exactly what you need to do. But generally, depending on the scope and the size. So under $10,000, for instance, you just got to solicit 3 quotes. Over 10, you need an RFP. So you need to put that out there. An RFP, and there's guidelines of how to do that, right? So it'll say you have to have it in a major newspaper for 3 days or blah, blah, blah. And then you can also share it with people that you want to bid, but then it's going to be the lowest qualified bidder. So it's not who you pick, but it's who you pick that charges the least amount with the qualifications, which is important. And, you know, as we go through this process together with you and everybody else, you'll learn about that a little bit more, because you can have qualifications that will help to vet who is going to be bidding on your project.
Now, just to take Leslie's question, so, but access to that list in the 3 bids, though, that does not have to come in at time of application, right? This is going to be something that happens after application, Todd, or when does that happen in the scheme of things here?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Timeline for that, is that, does Leslie have to access this list and go to bid before she applies, or is this going to be, this is something that happens if the grant is awarded, this process begins and she would start accessing that
The
list?
process begins after you have money. You can't go out to bid until you have money, right? You know, you have to be awarded before you can start soliciting. But what you do need to do for your application is have some idea of what the costs are going to be. And the beauty of the state is people who you request a quote for cannot bid on it. So, you know, it becomes a strategic, I don't want to say game, but you have to be strategic on who you want to request to give you a quote, because then they are no longer able to bid. So you have to, you know, you have to get in the phone book and make calls and do site visits and probably multiple ones.
So this is only, remember what we're answering from SHPO is only for buildings that are on the state or national register or in a registered district or are eligible to be listed on a registered district. So if your building is less than 50 years old, this doesn't apply to you, because
No, it does though. No, this is the bidding. This is the bidding.
Oh, for the bidding. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
so SHPO,
Bidding, yes. Sorry.
So just so everybody knows, I was the good to great coordinator for the last 5 years, but I'm now just doing environmental review, so that may be the confusion. But for environmental review under SHPO is regulatory. Administration of the grant is through Connecticut Humanities. I'm just here to help.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you, Liz. I see Vivian's hand up, so let's call on her next.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. So within your eligibility or the information, it mentioned for nonprofits, arts, cultural. So with this grant, before we apply and look at the eligibility, so we normally do like family literacy night or numeracy nights that infuse the arts integrated programs within the school system of Hartford. Is this something that we can apply for?
So your organization is mainly doing literacy based programs for school children. That's what your mission is and your work is?
Yes, part of our mission is yes, that is correct.
I think typically, and Liz, I don't know if you want to jump in here, we've kind of made a distinction between using literature as a form of understanding or art versus teaching people to read. And typically the literacy side of things has not fallen under the eligibility for the other programs that we've administered together. So I would be tempted to say it's sounding like not eligible, but I'd love you to confirm.
Vivian, from what you've said, I would say not eligible for this particular grant, no.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to make sure, because it seems from what I'm listening, it seems similar to the HOT grants that you guys had done before.
Yeah, no, it is very different from the HOT grants.
Okay, thank you for confirming.
That's no problem. It's confusing.
It is, and we can answer more questions offline about specific eligibility for organizations. I see Morgan's hand up, and then I want to go back to Leanne.
Thank you. My question is for Todd. If we are working with an architect previously with a greater scope of, different stages in our planning, and we're applying for one part of that, does the architect also have to go out to bid, or can that be matched with our matching funds?
Well, that's a twist there at the end. So yes, you can, if your matching funds does not have to follow state procurement rules. However, if you were not going to use your matching funds, when you hired your architect, you would have had to gone through a procedure that is similar, if not at least identical to ours. But to answer your question, Morgan, if you are using your own dime with your match to pay the architectural fees, then you do not have to go through the state procurement process.
Okay, so just wanted to make sure. So like if we ask for $100,000 for the Good to Great grant, our $20,000 match can go to offset the cost of the architect that we've been using, and we go out to the sealed bidding process with just the grant funds.
Correct, but you wouldn't be able to use any of the grant funds for
The
the
architect.
which includes building administration. So the building administration as well would have to go through your own dime.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I see John has his hand up as well.
Yep, let's go to John first, and then Leanne, and then I know we're going to have to start to wrap here because we're about 6 minutes from the hour.
John, you're on mute.
There we go. Okay. Hear me? Yes. So we have a general idea of what we want to do. We have a lovely history center, which is reasonably new, maybe 15 or 20 years old. And but our displays are not, we want to make them more interesting, more appealing, more attractive. Can we use funds for a consultant to give us ideas on how to make that happen?
It sounds like you are at a planning stage for more exhibit work, and I think we should talk at Connecticut Humanities about potential fits to some of our other grant lines here. It's sounding more like transforming exhibits versus transforming the space that your exhibits would be in, and I think that's one line of how I'm describing it. Like there are some places that say, I've got a back room that right now is storage. We'd like to move storage somewhere else so that we can open up that back room and start doing exhibits there. And to do that, we need to make some changes to that physical space to make it exhibit ready, wiring, lighting. Those would be the kind of things, not to do the research that would be for the next specific exhibit that's going to go in there, whether it be for a shorter term or longer term. But we have other grant lines that can help you out. Actually, it would be to transform the space. It's a kind of a big open empty space with homemade exhibits on the walls around. And, it's we're going to have to make it much, we're going to have to change our space and utilize the space that we're in properly. So what do you think? I mean, Todd, feel free to jump in as well. But I think by my understanding is if you want to make that space not for a specific installation, but to be getting it to a space. Okay, Liz, sorry.
I'll jump in. John, I think you could make a case for yes. So it would just have to be sort of the bigger picture, right? So it would be the designer to the implementation of the exhibit. So the planning and all the construction for the exhibit, the research, the implementation. We have funded in the past an exhibit and a space change for an organization in the past. So I think the answer would be yes, but you'd have to have sort of this very holistic approach towards the application.
We have to have a better idea ourselves.
And you'd have to have a better idea yourselves.
Yeah, we might need to hire a consultant right now to give us those ideas to then, I'll put in the letter of intent already, but letter of interest, but with the application, I would say, we got this person, he told us these are some things that we could do. And so would that be appropriate?
Let's talk some more here, because I just want to make sure we're giving the same guidance to you that we're giving to everybody here. But the intent is that this is not an end run to easier access to dollars for existing granting programs that we or the Office of the Arts or SHPO run otherwise, and it's to do more capital work than intellectual work. So that's something I would want to dig a little bit deeper on here. We got 3 minutes left. Leanne, is there anything left in the chat? And I know we've got Pat's hand up, but we can spend a little bit more time after we end the formal meeting for some folks, if I'm able to stay on for a little bit, if you were able to stay on.
Yeah, let me just, I'm sorry, Leanne, let me just interrupt. There's a bunch of questions that we're missing here. So I don't know how you want to handle this, Leanne. If you want to, kind of start from the top and go down so that we get everybody, or do we want to just capture this and email people back? I'm not sure how you want to handle this, but I don't want to leave people hanging.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of questions, and a lot of them are more specific to specific organizations. So I would recommend please emailing us at grants@cthumanities.org. I also just put that in the chat. If we're not able to find an answer, we'll get the answer for you, but this way we'll be able to get everyone's answer, and we'll try to do this as quickly as possible.
And we'll end the formal meeting in a few moments here. But like I said, we'll be able to hang on for a little bit to maybe get some of those questions resolved before you leave the Zoom. Is there one more question you want to get in here before we close it, or maybe we should close it in a couple moments here because we're just about 1 minute out.
I just saw that Liz had asked me. Liz, can you reiterate the question? That I can't find it in the chat. There's too many. There's too many messages.
No, this is the craziest chat I have ever seen.
Yeah,
you guys have been doing an amazing job.
Sorry, that's why we sort of have people start putting their hands up, because it just began to get crazy in the chat. Okay, so one of the questions was, please explain why you can't have the same contractor assist with the application and then bid on the project.
So the answer is that's what the state has as the bidding requirement, because theoretically, if somebody is helping you prepare a bid, they have undue advantage to getting that bid. So if I tell you, hey, you know what, we'll do it this way, put this in the bid, then I bid for exactly word to word. Now I have an advantage, don't I? So this is to be a balance for everybody to have a clear shot at it, to not give advantages to certain people.
Ethics. We're all doing stuff on the up and up here.
That is correct.
All right. It is 4 o'clock. Here, Jonathan, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Thank you. I'm good.
No, I was going to try to end the formal program here at 4 because I know there's people that have to run. We'll stop the recording in a moment as well. I will hang on, but I want to thank Amherst and Emily, especially from CLHO, for hosting us and giving this forum to be able to get all the questions answered, because as you can see, there's a lot of people with a lot of great questions. So we appreciate your making this happen. Liz, Todd, Jonathan, everyone at SHPO for working with us on this program, having the faith to work with us and to help answer all the questions that I'm still learning by the moment here how to answer. And to Leanne and Becky and everyone on our team for administering the program and all the great work you're doing, and Leanne for managing what seems like was a crazy chat. So I'm glad I don't even know the craziness, but thank you for helping us manage the crazy chat. But we can end recording here and we'll hang on, and thanks to everyone. Email grants@CT-Humanities with questions, and we'll get your answers as soon as you can. Thank you.
And thank you, Scott.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I think it would be great. I know there are a number of questions, including that one about the lease to own contract that didn't get addressed. So if we can answer any of those, I've been trying to keep track of. This is my crazy piece of paper of all of the questions. See this? Yes. And which ones have been addressed? But
the lease to own, I mean, it's so a lease to own agreement is not good enough. It would need to be like a 10-year lease, even if the agreement was switched over to own in 3. That a 3-year agreement to own at the end of it's not going to work.
Yeah. Okay. Meredith, are you hearing that? Okay, good.
Patricia,
I couldn't unmute. Yeah, it's just we're in the process of the lease to own agreement with the actual, like, a lease will terminate and the ownership will start at 3 years. So do I need to change that contract now before I sign that it's a 10-year lease, which I don't even know is an opportunity, but we still intend to purchase the entire space at 3 years?
Well, maybe, Meredith, you could do a 10-year lease with that year 3 you buy, as long as you have that language in the document. That's up to you.
I'm going to do 5.
Okay, I will ask.
And go.
Thanks, Meredith.
Thank you.
Patricia has had her hand up for a while, so I'd love to call on Patricia, and then we'll start to dive into stuff here. And if folks are still on, maybe just raising their hands at this point too, and we'll start going that way to see who's here before we start spend time answering questions for someone that's left. Patricia.
Okay, thank you. You don't want to put my video on. Okay, so just thank you for answering the question about the bond. So the amount that's allocated to the Good to Great grant program, so that's in a range. There's not a specific amount allocated to it at this point. It's 5 to 10 million.
I think there was $10 million was the budget that we're working for this year. Liz, has that been allowed yet? And Liz, you're on mute.
We're working with about $10 million, but some of this has to do with when bond money is released. And so one of the things that I probably should have started with is bond funding is very different than all other funding. It is very tricky, and it's really hard for small organizations to access it because the management of bond funds is so detailed and different than other things. Not that it's not great. So this project, this grant is designed to give organizations that wouldn't necessarily have the capacity to get money directly from the bond commission to actually access some bond funding, which is super. But the bond commission, there's a process by which the drawdowns have to go, and the bond commission has got to be meeting, and sometimes the bond commission doesn't. So we feel pretty good that we have about $8 million that we're going to be able to access in that vicinity. It may be more, it may be less, and it just depends on when people get moving and how we can get the money out the door for bond commission approvals. So it gets a little confusing to answer that question.
Okay, it helps. So that was part A. Part B was, so you answered the question about the contractors, but if you also are looking for some level of specificity in the application, and for the project that we're doing in a community theater, we're really going to need to rely on experts in theater design and lighting systems. So was hoping to be able to work with a contractor who has that experience and expertise, Connecticut based, but you're telling me, which is helpful, that I shouldn't get them involved if I want them to bid on the project. So
if I heard that correctly, yes, that's correct. I mean, if you have somebody that you've worked with in the past and you want them to bid, then they can't help you put together the bid package. But
you want a specific bid or specificity in the cost estimates at the time of, say, the March 3rd.
That's correct.
It's this catch-22. You have to have stuff that's detailed enough so that people understand that your project is real and the numbers have some basis in reality. But if you really want to work with people, those can't be the people that help you ground your project and its cost in reality.
Okay. And thank you. And then I've got one last question. The other ones I'll take offline with you and Leanne. So if in our case, we have we're a community theater that has occupied a town-owned building for 40 years. We have a lease so the project that we're doing is for buildings that are owned by the town, but we're going to be applying for the Good to Great grant for what would be our responsibility. Say, for example, a lighting system, a new lighting system or something like that, that the town would not fund. But the project is part of a larger project where the town is contributing funds for another piece of the building that they will ultimately own. So I think we've talked enough that's valid. So my question is, I think you've answered this already, so I apologize. We're done. If I have anything else, I'll come back to you. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Thank you, Patricia. I see Jennifer's hand up next.
Hi, sorry, thank you. So I asked the question before. We went through the application process for CIF and are hoping to get that. When we go through CIF, we obviously will have to go through the bid process for that as well. When hopefully if we get money for Good to Great, do we then need to go through the bid process again? but it would be for a contractor that we hopefully already have through CIF.
Would the funds be going toward, I mean, would you be going for the good to great for the same project that the CIF was funding?
It would be, so that's kind of my next question. Could I do it for like the same type of project, but not the actual like contractor part of it? It's for the HVAC system. Could I use it for a different part of that process instead of just the contractor part?
Yeah, so it sounds like, and forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but it sounds like you're talking about CIF for HVAC and then good to great for HVAC, which would not fly.
Sorry, can you repeat that? There was noise in the background.
Yeah, sure. If you're getting CIF for HVAC and then you're applying for good to great for HVAC, then that would not fly because you're applying for 2 state grants for the same thing. So that's not an eligible.
Okay, no, that absolutely answers the question. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm not seeing any other hands up right now. I know there's lots of stuff in the chat, but I'm gonna encourage you, if you're here and you've got a question, to one way or the other raise your hand here so we know that you're on and answer the question. I see Ed's hand has come up, an actual hand versus the. Go for it, Ed.
There we go. Yes, hi, thank you for taking my question. We're in the process, just before the pandemic, we were very close to pulling the trigger on purchasing the building. And then obviously, I run a theater company, a professional theater company here in Connecticut. And the pandemic kind of put a kibosh on just about everybody, including our plans. And we're now starting them up again. And we're in the process of, looks like we're negotiating to purchase a building. We plan to shortly, and renovate it and make it a new theater. So obviously, it's good to great in that concept. I mean, I can make that argument. The question I have is, right now, what's important to us is putting together a rock solid feasibility study for this project. Updating the one we had and adding more to it. With something in that area, even though we have it, and as a footnote, we have a sponsor or sponsors that would cover the majority of the costs of the purchase, and certainly could match any portion required for the feasibility study.
I mean, others jump in here, but you have to get to the point that something has the ribbon cutting moment there. So yes,
well,
you
we
could
could make
get
it
in
a
some.
bow. Can we make it a bow and just cut the bow on around the program? I'm sorry.
There's got to be some physical space that's been transformed with a capital work. So you could get some
Physically.
planning work involved in this as well. But at the end of the day, it's got to be the consultant work to lead to the transformation of a space. So you've got the capital to then have the ribbon cutting on the space that you're now transforming. So if it's just the feasibility study, a ceremonial ribbon cutting for the end of the feasibility study is not going to meet the intent of the program.
And would we have to have the building purchased prior to the feasibility study to get the grant? Because then you'd have your own property or capital to invest in, or how does that work? Because we'd be putting the cart before the horse in this process if we were to do that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're talking about getting, and forgive me if I misunderstood, of using good to great money to purchase a building and then put your nonprofit organization in that and do a ribbon cutting. So all those things would happen. So you're
within 2 years, right? Within 2 years.
Within 2 years, yeah. So you'd be acquiring a building, moving all your stuff into it, and then opening it.
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Yeah, I think that would qualify. I don't know why that wouldn't. You'd have to demonstrate, though, that you have the ability to pull that off. You have a building already in mind that you have an option on or something?
Yes, but it's a question of how far do we go formalizing it right now. There's a pace that we're working at. To do that would be not pulling the trigger, but it's a lot of work to lock in everything before we have a grant, as other people.
I mean, it's just you're trying to do a lot more because some places have their space. So you've got to be able to articulate in an application that by the end of 2 years, you've gotten the space. You've been able to transform the space and have that ribbon cutting for the moment for the part that you want to turn to the public and all the steps in between,
right?
And give the confidence to the reviewers that all of the work that you're doing is feasible in that window.
Yes, that's the big question. Can we do it in 2 years? Usually these are 3 to 5 year projects by the time the dust settles, for everything. So I'm not sure if we could work on that expedited schedule, but I would look into it and get back.
Well, let me answer this, and Liz, jump in if I'm wrong here. This is not intended to be the last time the Good to Great is offered. There's the hope that this program would be offered again in the future should bond funds continue to be made available. This is not hopefully the last time this program will ever run.
Yeah, I mean, right now, we can say that it's not hopefully the last time this program will ever be run. I feel very confident saying that. But I would also say, don't lose sight of the fact that ultimately, whatever it is, the project that you are looking for funding for has got to bring you from good to great, right? And so if you can, as you go through the application, if your project is a good fit, you'll find that the answers to the questions are just going to flow. Like it's going to make sense. If you're finding that you have to squish things together, or if it's not feeling right, reach out to Leanne through grants at CT or whatever that web email is, and find out, because that's really eye on the prize here, right? Is it going to move the needle for your organization in a big way? And of course, what you're saying, Ed, sounds like it would. Yeah, let's see what you can do. See if it feels like it's a good fit.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Leslie.
I'm back again with a bidding process question. So, and this will hopefully be an easy one. Todd mentioned earlier some kind of packet that spells out all the parameters. And I'm not sure how to get that packet. Is that something on the SHPO website, or how do I get it?
Scott, do you guys have that on the website, your website? The state bidding. So I'll send an email to Scott. If not today, then Monday.
Send it to me and Leanne. We will put it up there.
Oh, we'll put it up there for you guys.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
And I got to hop off for another call. So good luck, guys. Thank you.
I am not seeing any other Zoom hands or real hands. I know Leanne's been answering stuff in the chat still.
Hi there.
Oh, here we go. ETH1.
That's me, Sheila, Edmond Town Hall. How are you?
Good, Sheila. How are you doing? Sorry, I just F1. It seems like Ethernet 1 connection was what I was seeing there. But Edmond Town Hall makes complete sense now that I understand. So please, how's it going, Sheila?
Good, thank you. So the question I have is, the state of Connecticut has a network of contractors who have been sort of pre-approved so that they don't have to necessarily go through the standard bidding process when you have these types of capital projects. And I only know this because I have worked with some of them in the past when we've done capital projects, and it makes things way easier because they've sort of been pre-approved. Are those type of contractors allowed to be part of this grant thing too? Or how would that work with that network?
So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if those contractors are available to use with bond funds. This is.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I've used them with bond funds. Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you? What I would do is shoot that question in and with the references to Leanne over at Connecticut Humanities, and let's see what information we can find for you. Okay.
Grants at cthumanities.org.
Thank you.
Leslie, your hand is up. Is that still up, or is that a new question? Okay, I'm gonna lower your hand then. Okay.
Nicole had asked a question earlier. I don't know if Nicole Carpenter, you're still here, but if there's a place where people can see what projects have been funded in the past. Liz, is there a list on the website?
Honestly, I'm not sure if there's a list on the SHPO website, but there may be.
I can check. I'm not sure.
Many of the projects are still going on. These can take quite a while to actually close out. This is just for those of you who are staying, all the contracts that we have to go into are actually put together by outside counsel. It's a fairly detailed contracting process, so it doesn't move fast. I mean, you have to have your ducks in a row to get this to move quickly. It is not the same as all the other programs that we run.
All right, not seeing anything else and being at 4:17. Oh, Kathy. I'm silently and verbally judging you, but Kathy.
I'm sorry to.
I only say that because I love
last
you.
one. So I was just going to say, when the project gets assigned, does the project shift over to DECD? Is it going to be with Vince or Chris, and you guys are out of it?
It's not, Connecticut Humanities will be out of it. It probably will not be with either Vince or Chris, but they've been hiring a whole bunch of new associates. So one of the reasons that it took so long to relaunch this program is that we had no staff at DECD who could manage it. And I think they've recently hired, they've had 2 new folks and they're hiring 2 new folks.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And the one thing too that I'll mention, it's
reporting would still be at the very end through our system. I think we're anticipating at some level your final report, but we can't distribute the funds. We can't do the contracting. We can't help you with the legal, but the parts that we can will run through us.
Thank you.
Sheila, is that a new hand up or is this a existing hand up? I think that.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yep. Oh, you muted again.
Sorry. All right. Sorry about that. So my question has to do with, oh my God, I can't believe this. Now it just escapes. Isn't that terrible? It was really important too. I'm so embarrassed. Oh goodness. Never mind. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Totally
It's
slipped.
just email grants at CT Humanities, and if Leanne and I can answer, we will. If not, we'll get you the answer you need.
Oh, wait, no, I just remembered. This is what it has to do with. We as an organization are not a 501c3, but our funding arm, they are called the Friends of Edmond Town Hall. They are applying for this grant on our behalf. And so I heard you speaking with some of the other organizations about having a 10-year lease and all this kind of stuff. And I wasn't sure whether that means the Friends of Edmond Town Hall have to have a lease with in the building for 10 years or something of that nature.
This is a good one. How does the relationship work with friends groups, Liz?
Yeah. So, hi, Pruny. So I think that's going to be complicated because, right, who owns the building? The building is owned by the municipality?
Yes, it is. But it's not managed by them. It's managed by a volunteer board. And that board is responsible for the oversight of the staff and the maintenance of the building.
Okay. Yeah, so let's take it offline. Again, throw that in there because this is going to be very specific and we'll have to shoot it back to probably Todd to.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get you the answer, but because municipalities have pathways to different funding, this was supposed to be separate from that, but we'll take your individual case and give you the best guidance we can.
Okay, great. So it would be for funding for things they definitely don't want to pay for.
That's the
really
sticky wicket.
So thank you.
All right. Now seeing no other hands. Emily, can you stop the recording? Because I think we're still recording.
Yes, we are still recording. I can stop now. Great.